What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 9. Top DFS picks.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for this week's NFL slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 9, let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my top DFS pick at the quarterback position, he's also the most expensive quarterback on the slate, but for good reason. I like Josh Allen from the Buffalo Bills playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Josh Allen has averaged 28.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.4 rush attempts per game. He's projected at 26.3 fantasy points here in Week 9, and he's 8,200 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Buffalo Bills favored by 14.5. So it's a pretty high scoring game here. Fantastic matchup. And Josh Allen has scored 30, 33, and 40 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So he's been on fire. You get a nice rushing floor from Josh Allen, and he's got some monster upside with those pass catchers in Stephon Diggs. So I like Josh Allen here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. The other quarterback that I like is Aaron Rodgers from the Green Bay Packers playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Aaron Rodgers has averaged 20.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 2.3 rush attempts per game. He's projected at 18.3 fantasy points here in Week 9. But I think he can score over 20 fantasy points in this one. I think he can score close to 25 fantasy points here. And he's only 7,500 DraftKings salary, 600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 55.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Packers trailing by 1. So a super high scoring game, a fantastic matchup, a close competitive game. And Aaron Rodgers has scored 16, 25, and 24 fantasy points in the last 3 games. So I like Aaron Rodgers here versus the Kansas City Chiefs.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So there's 3 running back studs on the slate that I like. And I'll give you my favorite one out of all of them, and he's not the most salary. My top DFS pick at the running back position is Dalvin Cook from the Minnesota Vikings playing the Baltimore Ravens, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 6th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Dalvin Cook has averaged 16.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 19.6 rush attempts per game and 4 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 69% of the snaps. He's projected at 20.3 fantasy points here in week 9. He's 7,700 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Vikings trailing by 5.5. Now, Dalvin Cook, his ownership might come down a little bit because he only scored 8 fantasy points last week, although he got 18 rush attempts and 2 pass targets. Now he's got a fantastic matchup, so I like Dalvin Cook here versus the Baltimore Ravens. Okay, and a lower salary pick that I like is Myles Gaskin. So he's not my top DFS pick. I just wanted to give you a lower salary pick that I like this week. Myles Gaskin from the Miami Dolphins playing the Houston Texans, and who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Now, Myles Gaskin has averaged 11.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.3 rush attempts per game and 5 pass targets per game. So that average is pretty low on rush attempts, but his last 2 weeks, he got 12 and 15 rush attempts and 4 and 4 pass targets. So 16 and 19 touches in the last 2 weeks. He's projected at 12.2 fantasy points here in week 9. He's only 5,800 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Miami Dolphins favored by 7. So he's got a fantastic matchup, and this could turn into a running game script. He could get a ton of opportunity in this game. So I like Myles Gaskin as kind of a sneaky pick here versus the Houston Texans.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So, of course, one of my favorite wide receivers on the slate to stack them up with Josh Allen is Stephon Diggs. He's been on fire this season, averaging 9.4 pass targets per game and 16.2 fantasy points per game. He's projected at 19.4 fantasy points here in week 9. He's 7,700 DraftKings salary, 100 less on FanDuel. And the Jacksonville Jaguars give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So I like Stephon Diggs here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. But coming off of Stephon Diggs, if you want to save some salary, I like Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the Miami Dolphins, who have the absolute worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks has averaged 16 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 88% of the snaps, projected at 14.3 fantasy points here in week 9. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 46.5 points scored in this game, with the Texans trailing by 7. So I just absolutely love this pick this week. I even liked him last week. Even though he had a tough quarterback matchup, he still scored 20 fantasy points off of 6 pass targets. Brandon Cook's just been on fire this season, and with the Houston Texans probably going to fall behind in this game, it's going to be a passing game script with a fantastic matchup.
So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Miami Dolphins. Now I also like Marquise Brown from the Baltimore Ravens playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Marquise Brown has averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.1 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 75% of the snaps, projected at 14.4 fantasy points here in week 9. He's only $6,000 DraftKings salary. He's $1,700 more on FanDuel, so I love that DraftKings price. He looks way underpriced on DraftKings, and we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 49.5 points scored in this game, with the Baltimore Ravens favored by 5.5. So this is a pretty high scoring game and a good wide receiver matchup. And Marquise Brown got 14 pass targets last game, put up 19 fantasy points. He's been a target monster, and he's just been super productive throughout the season. So I like Marquise Brown, especially on DraftKings here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, another one of my favorite wide receivers this week. A lot of picks from this game. Think this is a great game to stack. I like Jalen Waddle from the Miami Dolphins playing the Houston Texans, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Jalen Waddle has averaged 13.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 83% of the snaps, projected at 12.7 fantasy points here in week 9, and he's only $5,600 DraftKings salary, $500 more on FanDuel. And Jalen Waddle, he had a super tough cornerback matchup last week, only scored 7 fantasy points, but he did get 12 pass targets, and then the 2 weeks before that, he scored 15 and 29 fantasy points off of 8 and 13 pass targets. So monster volume for Jalen Waddle in a fantastic matchup. So I like Jalen Waddle here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. I like Dallas Goedert from the Philadelphia Eagles playing the LA Chargers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Dallas Goedert has averaged 10.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.4 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 74% of the snaps, projected at 11.6 fantasy points here in week 9, and he's only $4,500 DraftKings salary, $1,700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Eagles trailing by 2.5. So fantastic tight end matchup here, high scoring game, and a close competitive game. Dallas Goedert scored 13 fantasy points last week off of 7 pass targets. So I like Dallas Goedert here versus the LA Chargers. Now, I just wanted to bring up this pick. Not sure what his ownership is going to be yet, but I just love this guy. I liked him last week, and I think he's going to be a fantastic play again in week 9. So take a look at Dan Arnold from the Jacksonville Jaguars playing the Buffalo Bills, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing tight ends. But Dan Arnold has averaged 7.3 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.1 pass targets per game. He's projected at 8.3 fantasy points here in week 9, but he's only $3,400 DraftKings salary, $1,700 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Jacksonville Jaguars trailing by 14.5. So this is going to be a passing game script, and Dan Arnold got 10 pass targets last game, scored 15 fantasy points. He got 5 pass targets the week before that, and 8 pass targets the week before that. So he's seen his volume go up the past few weeks, and I think that's going to continue here into week 9. I think he's going to get a ton of pass targets again at low salary. So I like Dan Arnold here versus the Buffalo Bills.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.